Great day in Virginia. The 2nd District Congressional race now setting up to be a marquee matchup this fall. Tonight, Elaine Luria with a decisive victory over Karen Mallard. Luria picking up 62% of the vote to Mallard's 38%. That means Luria, a Naval Academy grad and former Navy commander, will face Congressman Scott Taylor in November. Taylor, a former Navy SEAL, winning easily tonight in his primary matchup against Mary Jones. Taylor was 76% of the vote. 13 News Now reporter Jacqueline Lee was live at Luria's victory party. And Jacqueline, two candidates with strong military backgrounds in a military district.
Yes, and that is what should make this race so interesting to watch. The Democrats need to pick up 24 seats in order to gain control of the House. Tonight, local voters decided that Elaine Luria is the best shot at beating incumbent Scott Taylor.
Thank you to all of you.
Elaine Luria thanking her supporters as she now moves to the fall and a matchup with Congressman Scott Taylor.
I'm feeling great about the energy we have moving into November.
Scott Taylor thankful for the support he received as well.
Fantastic. Look, I'm humbled that the voters again put their confidence in me.
The race is now a battle between veterans in the 2nd District. Both candidates uniquely positioned to represent a district where the military is the backbone of the region. With a fresh agreement with North Korea on potential denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and concessions by President Trump to end war games in South Korea, we pressed both candidates on whether that's a risk to military readiness. Taylor said he supports concessions that lead to peace and stability.
If it means pausing the war games to show a good faith gesture, which of course the North Koreans have as well, when you have hostages back, when you have a site shut down for nuclear, the nuclear testing site shut down, when missile tests have stopped, they've also done concessions as well. So I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Luria, a former surface warfare officer, telling us she puts a high priority on military readiness.
I understand the importance of maintaining that level of readiness, maintaining that training, and actually being there to support our allies in Japan and South Korea. So I think that maintaining that readiness is essential.
Leading into November, both candidates said they feel their backgrounds and determination to represent the voters will lead them to victory. And 13 News Now political analyst Quentin Kidd told me earlier today that in order for Democrats to win the race in November, they have to tie Scott Taylor to President Trump's actions, and they have to really energize that Democratic base. But the election is a few months away. Live in Virginia Beach, Jacqueline Lee, 13 News Now.
There were a total of 5 contests in Hampton Roads today in the Republican primary for U.S. Senate. Corey Stewart edged out a win over Nick Freitas with 45% of the vote. E.W. Jackson trailing in 3rd. Stewart will take on Senator Tim Kaine in the fall. And the Democratic primary in the 1st congressional race, Vanjie Williams won with 40% over Edwin Santana Jr. and John Sardarth. Williams will challenge incumbent Republican Rob Whitman in November.
Republicans also had a primary in the 4th Congressional District. Ryan McAdams won easily with 73% of the vote over Sean Fenty. McAdams will move on to face off against Democrat Donald McEachin in the fall.
You can find the results on our website and also on 13 News Now, the app. Stay with us as we continue to follow developments in these races leading up to Election Day in November. So much at stake in our current political climate.